Are you sick of politicians? What a daft question. Who isn't? I'm Lynn Irving Love. I'm standing as an independent MP for Rushcliffe in the general election. I've got a statement from whocanivotefor.co.uk. That's a website you can go to and you can find out who's standing in your area. And if there isn't anyone standing that you like, stand yourself. There'll be other people just like you thinking there's nobody there for me. So please consider standing if there isn't anybody for you. I'm not a politician and would consider it an insult to be classed as one. Anyone who has a career or some kind of standing at stake is corruptible, as we've seen all too clearly over the last few years. I'm not interested in a career, and I'm resourceful enough not to need to put my nose in the trough. It's got to be windy. We see the desperation to hang onto their well-paid job with expenses that other people of Britain can only dream of, and their position in the party or the government, to say nothing of media careers and directorships and peerages that come after they've finished their career. They're literally saying anything to win, in spite of all previous evidences to their true colours. The manifestos are worth less than toilet paper. There's nothing that holds them to the promises in it. And let's face it, were we promised any of what we've actually got? Let's have a look at it. Let's have a look at what we've actually received. Organised illegal immigration, aided and abetted by the government. Prevention of lawful activities such as work, going to the pub, meeting friends, going to school, organised by the government. Illegal use of psychological techniques to manipulate compliance. Surveillance, water companies dumping sewerage in the river that had just become clean enough to swim in. They control that, they have Ofwat. Net zero tyranny that they've exempted themselves from so they can go jetting around the world to the cop-out summits. Toxic pesticides wave through after years of successful resistance to them. That's their agrochemical friends, obviously. Banks refusing to lend and forcing people out of homes into expensive rented accommodation. Embroiling our armed forces in other people's wars and threatening our kids with that too. Actually threatening to send our kids to war. I can see a whole lot of you going, well, if I'm going to take up arms, I know who it's going to be against. So war's been illegal in this country, unless we're under direct attack, since 1928, and yet there we are again, bombing Yemen and Russia. And what else have we had? The hijacking of gay rights to suit a transgender agenda. We've just about got equality in this country, and they're absolutely trashing it with this dogma that they're forcing on people. So nobody made an informed choice at the last election because nobody was told about any of these policies. And we weren't told that Labour was going to agree with them all and actually criticise the government for not being bad enough. So, locally, who voted for the massive Minecraft-style houses that are being built, the massive housing estates that are being put all over our countryside, circling every urban area? I mean, very locally, they're around Melton and also around Gampston. We should be preserving and enhancing our green spaces in our countryside. Who really wanted more surveillance? I'm actually waiting for evidence that this reduces crime, or that it even the police even look at it. No evidence at all that this has happened. All it seems to do is collect fines. Who thought they'd rather have fly tipping than reasonable recycling centres? Recycling tips, we call them, that can responsibly dispose of waste. So those don't seem like sensible policies to me, and I certainly didn't vote for them. There is a system that would allow us to challenge this, and it's called direct democracy. I'm standing with that in mind. It basically means that we can all vote on any new legislation, or actually we can, if we get 1% of the population behind us, we can call a referendum on anything, as long as it doesn't violate other people's rights. So I'm standing because I can no longer watch the destruction of the country and the future of our kids. I'm just going to make sure I can look my kids in the eye and say I did what I could. Elections are a small part of the solution, but they do allow us to pattern interrupt the staged Punch and Judy show that they put on for us every 5 years. They clearly see this election as a simple baton handover, and Sunak actually seems to be trying to make himself so unpopular that, like Corbyn did last time, that Labour will inevitably win. Personally, I don't think it has to be that way. I think people are absolutely sick of both of them, and it could be the time of independence or small parties. So my promise is to listen, to do the next right thing, review all legislation to see if it's unlawful, and it is if it violates our rights by birth. I support the campaign for direct democracy, so any legislation has to face a referendum. It's the Swiss model, and that should cut down the risk to legislation, the rush to legislate. They're not going to want to do that if they have to face a vote on it. I will push for prosecutions and reclamation of the billions of pounds transferred fraudulently from us to their oligarch corporate friends. The biggest wealth transfer in history. So I promise to support and invest in the community level energy solutions so that we don't have to pay good money to subsidise German and French energy bills, and we do that at the moment. I'm proposing green hydrogen. I think that's a good bridge, but maybe you've got better ideas, and that is something that I think we should all get together and have at a community level. I'm actively seeking and implementing solutions now that I expect to be able to free us and make communities self-sufficient and independent of corporate interests. Effective healthcare outside of the current pharmaceutically dictated model. Schooling, one size clearly fits nobody. Have we ever had a more downtrodden and helpless generation? There are lots of great models, and indeed there are some good practices, past and present, generally on a much smaller scale and more tailored to individual people, and not to those who can sit for 5 hours a day. So these models actually prepare children to be healthy, critical, functional thinkers who can carve out their own path instead of trying to fit into a defined rut. Our transport infrastructure is based on causing maximum inconvenience and to deter travel, often backed up with cameras and fines or cancelled trains and manufactured strikes. Spending on roads and public transport rather than surveillance would be a start, as would be using a sensible road surface, like recycled rubber, rather than obediently buying oil industry waste products. I'm going to give a shout out to farmers at this point. We're standing with you. Has there ever been an industry under so much pressure from its own government? Farmers, you should be free to produce food and make a good living from it. We should all have fresh, cheap, local food. No farmers, no food. It's not just the government, it's the supermarkets too. But government had the power to regulate that, has chosen not to. So the idea of having locally produced, cheap, good quality food is not new. We used to have market gardens in cities, and farms locally kept a steady supply all year. To take our farmers away from producing food and create a food crisis is immoral and irresponsible. I believe in a very local, small administration for the people, not government by supranational organisations and corporations, forcing their wackadoodle agendas on us via Westminster, or Westminster, as it's becoming commonly referred to. And what of the media? Getting rid of the almost monopoly state is crucial for free, honest and independent reporting. As it is, there are only a few media companies, and they tend to have the same shareholders. And they spend their time reporting within the constraining limits of their paymaster's narrative, and they're held to that by Ofcom. We cannot know the truth and make informed choices without free dissemination of information and hearing from a variety of sources. I was born and bred in Rushcliffe. My parents were at the heart of village life, running the shop, and it became ever more onerous as government and councils and newly privatised post office became ever more megalomaniacal. My family, nuclear and wider, are here. I hope very much to make it a wonderful place for their children and their grandchildren. I'm now proudly fully involved in village life. I use the amenities and help organise and join in events and groups. I have lots of experience and knowledge of this area and our people, and I'm proud that I have no experience whatsoever in government. This seems to be a huge advantage from my point of view, as MPs and councillors seem to be only experienced in messing things up for us. To make such a mess requires intent, as nobody is that incompetent. The con labs try hard to put fear into people, talking about the need for serious politicians with experience and knowledge of the system. Well, how's that working out for us? They have about the only job in the country that requires no training, no experience, no qualifications. And they have tens of thousands of Whitehall bureaucrats and almost unlimited taxpayers' money to make their wishes come true. What could you do with that? Basically, the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. Con labs, as George Galloway likes to say, are two can't get my teeth in, two cheeks of the same bottom. That's my polite version. You change nothing by voting for the con labs. They have their party faithful to do that for them. The party faithful are a minority, and yet they're the only ones that turn out at elections. So that 30% of the people who vote for either Tory or Labour, they get whichever muppet has been chosen by the central party and put in that area. So it's only their members, only their voters that turn out, and everyone else has learnt to feel helpless. We have learned helplessness, and we feel as if we can't make a difference. I would say if you don't like who's on your ballot paper, stand for yourself, or at least write "no confidence in the system" or similar on your paper, because these papers are counted, and even if that doesn't actually affect the number or the winner, it actually means that it dilutes the percentages as well, and it also shows, which means that people like me lose the deposit, by the way, dilutes the percentages of the other candidates if you've put "I do not consent" or "no confidence." But what it also means is that you haven't simply tacitly, by staying silent, you haven't just agreed by default to whichever muppet is chosen. And then by being quiet, you've basically agreed to be governed by these people. So remember, you have the right to thrive. The reason you're not thriving is because government has colluded with an unelected global corporatocracy to make that happen. We can change it. Happy Independence Day.